Brown? No. Oh. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Brown. Mr. Larson is next in line. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Poole, thanks for being here and helping us out again and on this. One day you and I will agree on something. But I want to get back to my opening statement and ask your opinion about Coldplay. No, about defense issues in particular. You've done quite a bit of work on this issue of privatization, and but I'm wondering if you've thought through beyond a seat at the board, which is what you've recommended.
Right.
But this is really more than just about a seat at the board. It's about operations and such.
Sure.
Have you thought through or done any writing on that particular issue?
I have not. I'm aware that this is a subject that's come up in every single country that has corporatized their air traffic control, and in some the solutions vary. Some of them have had civilian controllers take over for the Defense Department controllers, but with still interfaces, obviously, on policy and operations with the defense agency. Others have had basically co-training to make the two parts work together a little more smoothly. But I mean, there's an annual conference on civil military air traffic control that's sponsored by ATCA, the Air Traffic Control Association. And it was here last November across the river in Maryland. So this is a subject that everyone in air traffic control knows a whole lot about and is continually monitoring. It's a subject that every country that is corporatized has had to deal with, but I have not studied it in any depth.
Yeah, I can't imagine that the other countries that we've discussed today probably would have the extent. To the extent that the MOAs and the MOUs exist between FAA and DoD, it's probably a unique pile, probably higher than the pile of paper that Mr. Callio has on his desk
It's
today.
probably so, given the size of our country and the size of our defense budget. Yeah.
So then you couldn't estimate today sort of how long it would take to either unwind those and wind them back up, or to review and replace, and so that those relationships.
Well, my suggestion would be that, as with existing contracts, both internal contracts with employees and external contracts with suppliers and so forth, all of those would remain in force. You don't just disrupt those at the time of transition. They would remain in force, and then over time, once the corporation is up and running, they could be reviewed and evaluated and discussed. Do they still make as much sense as they did when the FAA was running the system? Yeah,
there are some issues, though, with regards to that very question. You touched on it earlier. You suggested that a more cost-effective air navigation service provider would drive down the unit cost of providing ATC services, and that's been the focus, cost-effectiveness. Not as a criticism of the DoD, but a lot of times cost-effectiveness isn't the primary goal.
Sure. It's a factor, but it's not the primary purpose.
It's certainly a factor, but not the primary purpose. Mm-hmm. And so has there been any thinking, maybe not your thinking, has anyone else then thought about how the DoD would reconcile its needs vis-a-vis the corporation if the corporation is determining cost effectiveness, but the DoD has other
well,
goals?
One example is the primary radars, which that's in effect a joint operation between FAA and the DoD, and the primary radars need to be retained for defense purposes, defense and homeland security purposes, regardless of whether they're still cost-effective for air traffic control. So there's a situation in which that relationship will remain in some form. I agree that details definitely are going to need to be worked out on this, and that's why you have a several-year transition period before the corporation would be in full operation and full control of the system.
But then do you? It's hard. I had all these great questions for you. It's hard to. It's hard to ask them, because if you haven't thought about these over your 30 years of experience, who has thought about these questions over 30 years of experience?
Well, every other country that has implemented a corporatized air traffic system has thought about and worked out the relationships. And this is just not something that I have. There's a lot of subjects in my portfolio, and this is just not one that I've gotten into in detail. But I know that it's been dealt with and is being dealt with all over the world.
But it seems to me that this is just the beginning of the questions I have about this issue, and it actually might be better for the Armed Services Committee to explore these issues from a DoD perspective, as opposed to the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee solely exploring these.
Yeah, it's certainly.
You would agree with that?
It's their turf also, definitely.
Thank you. We agree on that. Appreciate it. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman.